I'm with Fred Summer, law firm, the town council. It was brought to our attention by the chief not long ago that there are some properties in the township that are utilizing a lot more public services than other properties. This actually, to go back a few speakers to Linda, who made a comment shortly ago about concerns regarding the township's public services in general and how the township is addressing, potential issues there. And actually, for the record, I think Hanover Township is known to have generally pretty good public services. This actually shows the township's concern. The chief came to us and basically noted that there are a couple of properties in town that are basically being called upon by the police, by other departments of the township very disproportionately. I think everybody would accept that the idea of public services is that basically all residents, all businesses pay their fair share and utilize their fair share of services. If you have to have the police come to your property for a particular reason, or the fire department, I think that's something that is to be expected. But there are some, just to give an idea of the nature of the disproportionate use of public services by some of these properties, and the chief actually provided a statement that Fred from our firm is going to read in a moment. But so I kind of usurped this a little bit. But there are, from January of 2017 through the present, the Hanover Police Department was involved in 288 possession of controlled substance arrests, 171 domestic violence arrests or incidents, 19 aggravated assault incidents, and 92 simple assault incidents. 12% of all of these incidents were related to two properties in the township. So basically, there are a couple of properties in the township where the police department is spending an inordinate amount of time. What this ordinance basically does is it essentially, it's not going to cut off anybody's services, but it essentially sets kind of a quota for how many calls you can have to your property in a particular in a certain set of time before you basically have to recompensate the township for the services that you're using. And it's not limited to police visits to your property. These calls can be basically public health calls by the fire department. Some of the qualifying calls include violations of ordinances concerning the sale, service, or consumption of alcoholic beverages, disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace, littering or excessive noise, damage to property or injury to a person, improperly parking a vehicle on your property. There are a number of others. Basically, the ordinance is going to establish certain standards. So say it's going to set aside these standards so that if in a consecutive 60-day period, a particular property utilizes more than, like has the police visit, let's say, it sets the standards based upon the type of property. So, for example, if for residential properties in the township, it's not anything that any resident is going to have to be really concerned about. That's just that is utilizing the service on any kind of normal basis. If you have a house in the township, you would have to have the police visit your house basically more than 8 times in 60 consecutive days before the ordinance would kick in. For other types of properties, there are different levels. For multi-family dwelling and motels, if there are 5 through 40 dwelling units, you'd have to have 40 calls to the property before the ordinance would kick in. And it goes on and on like that. If you're a convenience grocery or liquor store, you'd have to have more than 10 qualifying calls in 60 consecutive days to have to kick in. If the ordinance kicks in with regard to your property, basically you're going to be cited, you're going to be issued a notice, and at that point, for every qualifying call for the next calendar year, for the next 12 consecutive months, you'll be assessed a fee of $500, increasing by $100 per call. You'll get a hearing in court. You won't have to pay any you won't have to pay any of these fines until the municipal judge actually finds that you have indeed exceeded the quota of the particular calls for your property in the 60 consecutive day period. But basically, the nature of this, it's going to for the properties that really are problem actors in the township and are utilizing far more or an extremely disproportionate amount of public services. They're ultimately going to have to pay a fine to the township for each call after a certain set of calls for a particular amount of time. So ideally, what it'll do is it'll either curb the behavior that's requiring the township to respond to these properties so constantly, or alternatively, it will force the properties to pay their fair share rather than having the entire township basically shoulder the costs for the excessive services that are being provided for a few properties. So that's kind of the nature of the ordinance in general. I think the committee will have something to say about it also.